They were more interested in the nearby nebula. Its colors with the Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. It was a massive spherical room that could hold representatives from 200 different species, with each delegation positioned at different heights and angles to accommodate various forms of biology and social hierarchy. At the center was a floating platform where speakers addressed the assembly. Hana stood on that platform with her hands shaking and 3 Velkari cubs clinging to her legs. She'd been given 30 minutes to prepare her testimony, which felt simultaneously too long and not nearly enough time. Around her, hundreds of aliens watched with eyes, sensors, and perception organs she couldn't even identify. Commander Junho and Mirai sat in the human delegation section, offering what support they could through encouraging looks. Coordinator Thelnis represented the Velkari, surrounded by a dozen other members of their species. And across the chamber, Ambassador Keshatar sat with the Vrathan delegation, their silver eyes fixed on Hana with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The council moderator, a crystalline being whose name Hana couldn't pronounce, initiated the session. Its voice echoed through translation devices in 100 languages simultaneously. This emergency session has been called to address the matter of human capability for cross-species child-rearing and its implications for galactic society. Dr. Hana Kim, human engineer, will provide testimony regarding her experience with Velkari juveniles. Dr. Kim, you may begin. Hana's mouth was dry. She'd rehearsed a speech on the way here, but looking out at this massive assembly, all her prepared words evaporated. She glanced down at the cubs. Pick looked nervous, its eyes cycling through worried colors. Ren was trying to appear brave but wasn't quite pulling it off. Suli just stared up at her with complete trust. That trust gave her courage. 3 months ago, I spilled coffee on a Velkari diplomat, Hana began. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. But that accident triggered an ancient Velkari protocol, and 3 cubs decided I was worthy of being their teacher. I didn't ask for this responsibility. I didn't plan for it. But they chose me, and I chose to honor that choice. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I'm not special. I'm just an engineer who fixes broken things. But these 3 taught me something important. They taught me that family isn't about biology or species. It's about trust and patience and showing up every day to do the work. They needed someone to teach them problem-solving and critical thinking. I needed to remember why I became an engineer in the first place, to help build things that matter. You speak of family. Keshatar's voice cut through the chamber. But you have created dependency. These cubs now view you as essential to their survival. What happens to them when you are gone? They'll be fine, Hana said firmly, because I'm not teaching them to depend on me. I'm teaching them to depend on themselves. Every day they solve problems I don't help them with. They learn from their mistakes. They help each other. Yes, they love me. But love isn't weakness. It's the foundation they're building their independence on. A representative from the Centauran delegation spoke up. Dr. Kim, the concern is not about these specific cubs. The concern is about precedent. If humanity has unusual capacity for forming parental bonds across species, what prevents humans from using that capacity for political gain? Nothing, Hana admitted, and a ripple of reaction went through the chamber. Nothing prevents that except human choice. Just like nothing prevents any species from using their strengths for harm, the Vrathan have advanced technology. The Velkari have incredible diplomatic skills. The Centaurans have military prowess. Every species brings something to the galactic community that could be used for good or for harm. The question isn't whether humans can form cross-species bonds. The question is whether you trust us to use that capability responsibly. And why should we trust you? Keshter stood up in their section. Humanity is young. You have been part of the galactic community for only 3 decades. You have not proven yourselves reliable long-term partners. Before Hana could respond, Coordinator Thelnis activated their speaking rights. Ambassador Keshtar, the Velkari have observed humanity carefully during those 3 decades. We have seen them make mistakes, yes. But we have also seen them learn from those mistakes. We have seen them approach problems with creativity and compassion. And we have seen Dr. Kim demonstrate both qualities in her care of our young. The Velkari have always been too trusting. Keshatar shot back. You see the best in others because you are incapable of seeing potential threats. We see potential, Thelnis replied calmly. We simply choose to nurture the positive potential rather than fear the negative. The moderator called for order. Dr. Kim, the cubs will now be brought forward to testify. Council protocols allow juveniles to speak in matters concerning their welfare. Hana hadn't known this was going to happen. She looked down at Pick, Ren, and Suli. They clicked nervously at each other, then at her. She crouched down to their level. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," she said softly. Suli chirped and patted her hand. Then all three cubs moved to the center of the platform, standing in a small line. They looked impossibly tiny in this massive chamber. Three small beings facing down the combined judgment of galactic civilization. The moderator addressed them directly. "Young Velkari, you are under no obligation to speak. But if you wish, you may tell this council about your experience with Dr. Kim." For a long moment, the cubs were silent. Then Pick stepped forward slightly and began to click. The translation came through clear and steady. "Teacher Hana shows us how things work. She shows us problems and how to fix them. She is patient when we make mistakes. She is happy when we succeed. She does not tell us what to think. She shows us how to think." Ren took over. "Teacher Hana is sometimes scared, but she's brave anyway. She works hard. She keeps promises. She makes us feel safe even when things are dangerous. She is honest. When she does not know something, she tells us, and we learn together." Suli spoke last. Teacher Hana knocked over coffee. Cubs saw the anointing. Cubs knew she was worthy. Teacher Hana did not want responsibility, but she took it anyway. That is strength. She teaches strength, not weakness. Different species, same heart. Love makes us stronger, not weaker. The chamber was absolutely silent when the cubs finished speaking. Even Keshatar seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Then a representative from a species Hana didn't recognize activated their speaking rights. These cubs defend their caretaker as expected, but their defense is not based on emotional attachment alone. They cite specific qualities: honesty, patience, courage, integrity. These are not the words of program dependents. These are observations from thinking beings. Another representative spoke. The cubs also acknowledged that Dr. Kim was reluctant. She did not seek this role. That argues against manipulation. Or it argues for subtle manipulation, Keshatar countered. But the ambassador's voice had lost some of its earlier certainty, making the subject believe they initiated the relationship. "I did initiate it," Suli chirped, speaking out of turn. "I saw worthiness. I chose, my siblings chose. We chose correctly. Teacher Hana proves it every day." Mirai stood in the human delegation section. "With respect to Ambassador Keshatar and the Vrathan Collective, I believe the fundamental question here is not about human capability. It's about fear. The Vrathan fear that love and attachment create vulnerability. Humanity believes that love and attachment create resilience. Neither position is objectively correct. They are different cultural values. The question is whether this council will allow different cultural values to coexist, or whether we will demand conformity to a single philosophy." "Well said," a voice came from a new section. The Karathi delegation, the species that had fought the Vrathan centuries ago, had been silent until now. Their representative, an elderly being with features that suggested both reptilian and mammalian ancestry, stood slowly. "My people nearly died because we valued family bonds. The Vrathan nearly destroyed us for it, but we survived and we rebuilt, and our bonds made us stronger through that trial. I see in these cubs what I saw in my own children during those dark times. I see beings learning to be strong precisely because they have a foundation of love to build upon." Keshtar turned sharply. "You would defend humanity because they remind you of yourselves. That is bias, not reason." "Perhaps," the Karathi agreed. "But I ask you, Ambassador, what is the Vrathan position if not bias? You fear family bonds because they once threatened you. But fear is not wisdom. Fear is just another form of weakness." The debate continued for another hour. Representatives argued from every angle, citing history, psychology, cultural relativism, and political theory. Some supported humanity's approach. Others shared the Vrathan concerns. Still others simply wanted more time and data before making any judgments. Finally, the moderator called for a vote. The question was not whether to punish or restrict Hana specifically, but whether to implement galaxy-wide restrictions on human involvement in cross-species child-rearing. If the vote passed, humans would be officially limited in their ability to form parental bonds with alien young. The voting process was complex, with different species holding different way, The ships arrived without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 12 vessels, sleek and dark, broadcasting identification codes that made Commander Junho immediately call an emergency meeting. Hana sat in the command center conference room with the cubs at her feet. She'd tried to leave them in her quarters, but they'd become agitated and distressed. Coordinator Thelnis had advised that separating them from her during times of stress would be harmful. So now Pick, Ren, and Suli sat quietly beneath the conference table while galactic politics played out above them. The Vrathan Collective, Junho said grimly, pulling up images of the ships on the main screen. They're requesting permission to dock and meet with our Velkari delegation. They specifically mentioned Dr. Kim and the cubs. Who are the Vrathan? Hana asked. Miri answered from her seat across the table. A powerful coalition of species that practice communal child-rearing. They don't believe in individual parental bonds. Everyone raises everyone's children. They're highly successful, very advanced, and they view single guardian family structures as primitive and potentially dangerous. Dangerous how? They think individual attachment creates weakness and bias. They also think it's a tool for manipulation. Mirai pulled up historical data. 300 years ago, they fought a war against a species called the Karathi. The Karathi had very strong family bonds, and they used those bonds to build incredibly loyal military units and diplomatic networks. The Vrathan barely won that war, and they've been suspicious of parent-child bonding ever since. Coordinator Thelnis joined the meeting via video link. The Vrathan see Dr. Kim's success with our cubs as a threat. If humans can easily form parental bonds across species lines, it suggests humans could integrate deeply into any society. To the Vrathan, that's not cooperation. That's infiltration. That's ridiculous, Hana said. I'm not infiltrating anything. I'm just taking care of 3 kids. You are demonstrating a capability, Thelnis replied. Capability implies potential. Potential implies threat. This is how the Vrathan think. Junho made the decision to allow the Vrathan to dock, but under strict security protocols. They were given access to the diplomatic quarters, but nowhere else. No weapons, no unrestricted movement, no contact with the cubs without supervision. The Vrathan ambassador was named Keshatar, a being that looked almost human except for its completely silver eyes and the subtle shimmer to its skin. It wore simple robes and carried itself with the kind of confidence that came from representing a major power. The meeting took place in the station's formal diplomatic chamber, a neutral space designed to accommodate various species. Hana attended with the cubs, Coordinator Thelnis, Commander Junho Mirai, and a security detail that tried to look casual, but fooled nobody. Keshatar studied Hana for a long moment before speaking. Its voice was smooth, almost musical. Dr. Kim, you are the human who has taken Velkari young into your care. They chose me. I'm honoring their choice, and an interesting phrase, their choice. As if children are capable of making informed decisions about their own care. Keshatar's tone wasn't hostile exactly, but it carried judgment. In Vrathan society, young are raised by the community. No single individual holds disproportionate influence over their development. This prevents the formation of unhealthy dependencies and biases. Different species raise their young differently, Hana said, keeping her voice level. That doesn't make one way right and another way wrong, does it not? Consider the implications of your situation. 3 Velkari cubs, normally raised communally on their homeworld, are now solely dependent on a single human. You control their education, their social development, their entire worldview. That is not care, Dr. Kim. That is programming. Under the table, Hana felt Pick press against her leg. The cub was picking up on the tension in the room. She reached down and gently touched its carapace, a gesture of reassurance. I'm teaching them problem-solving and critical thinking, Hana said. They're learning to figure things out for themselves, not just accepting what I tell them. Taught by you, using your methods, through your cultural lens. Keshtar turned to address the room. This is precisely what concerns the Vrathan Collective. Humanity is new to the galactic community. Your species is still defining its role, and now we discover you have a remarkable talent for forming deep emotional bonds with other species young. That makes you very valuable as allies or very dangerous as adversaries. Are you threatening us? Junho's voice was cold. I am observing reality. Humans form attachments quickly and deeply. You call it empathy. We call it a vulnerability that can be weaponized. Keshatar looked back at Hana. If humans can raise Velkari cubs, they can raise any species young. And whoever raises the children shapes the future. Mirai stood up smoothly, her diplomatic training evident. Ambassador Keshitar, the Galactic Council has rules about cultural interference and child welfare. Dr. Kim is following established Velkari protocols. The cubs chose her through their own cultural tradition. No laws have been broken. Laws are not my concern. Precedent is. Keshitar gestured to the window where the Vrathan ships were visible against the stars. Today it is 3 cubs and 1 human. Tomorrow it could be exchange programs, cross-species adoption, humans embedded in every childcare system in the galaxy. And then humanity has influence that goes deeper than any military or economic power. You would have the children. The room fell silent. Even Hana had to admit there was a twisted logic to the concern. If humans really did have an unusual capacity for cross-species parenting, it could become a form of soft power. Not manipulation exactly, but influence. Coordinator Thelnis spoke carefully. Ambassador, the Velkari do not share your concerns. We initiated this caretaking. Dr. Kim has proven herself worthy. Our cubs are thriving, for now. But what happens when the caretaking ends? Will your cubs return to Velkari society unchanged? Or will they carry human perspectives, human values, human ways of thinking? Keshitar shook its head. This is how cultures are eroded from within. Not through conquest, but through the children. Ren chirped suddenly from under the table. The sound was sharp, almost aggressive. Then Suli joined in, and finally Pick. All 3 cubs emerged from beneath the table and positioned themselves between Hana and Keshitar. Their small bodies were tense, their mandibles clicking in patterns that sounded defensive. Pick, normally the most cautious, stepped forward and clicked rapidly at the Vrathan ambassador. Coordinator Thelnis's translator picked up the meaning. The cub says, teacher shows strength, not weakness. Teacher shows how to fix what is broken. You see danger where there is only learning. Keshtar looked down at the cubs with an expression that might have been surprise. The young defend their guardian. How predictable. They defend what they know to be true, Thelnis said quietly. Cubs do not lie, Ambassador. They do not understand politics or power games. They only know that Dr. Kim has treated them with patience and respect, that she has taught them valuable skills and that they feel safe with her. That is not programming. That is trust. Trust can be manufactured, not by children, not by Velkari children. Thelnis stood, and despite being a non-confrontational species, the coordinator's presence suddenly filled the room. You came here with concerns, Ambassador Keshitar. I understand those concerns, but I will not allow you to insult Dr. Kim or question her integrity, when she has done nothing but honor our customs and care for our young. If the Vrathan Collective has issues with the caretaking, take them to the Galactic Council. Do not bring them to this station. The meeting ended shortly after. Keshitar left with polite but cold farewells, and the Vrathan ships remained in orbit watching and waiting. Hana returned to her quarters feeling drained. The cubs were subdued, their earlier defensive energy replaced by quiet concern. They stayed close to her, occasionally touching her with their legs or making soft clicking sounds. Doyen came by an hour later with food and moral support. I watched a recording of the meeting. The cubs defending you like that was incredible. They shouldn't have had to. Hana pushed her food around her plate. Keshitar wasn't completely wrong, you know. I am influencing how they think. That's what teaching is. But you're not controlling them. There's a difference. Doyun watched as Suli brought Hana one of its smooth stones and placed it on the table beside her plate. They're developing their own personalities, making their own choices. That's healthy development, not programming. The Vrathan don't see it that way. The Vrathan lost a war to people who loved their families. Of course they don't trust family bonds. Doyen leaned back in his chair. But here's the thing, Hana. You can't let their fear dictate how you raise these cubs. They chose you. You accepted that responsibility. Now you have to see it through, regardless of who's watching or what they think. Later that night, Hana took the cubs to the station's observation deck. It was a large room with transparent walls offering a panoramic view of space. The cubs loved it there, pressing their faces to the glass and clicking excitedly at the stars. See that bright one? Hana pointed to a distant sun. That's the Velkari home system. That's where you're from, where you'll go back to when the caretaking ends. The cubs looked where she pointed, but they didn't seem particularly excited. The caretaking will not be as simple as teaching 3 cubs, Dr. Kim. You are being watched. by many. 3 weeks into the caretaking, Hana's quarters had transformed into something between a classroom and a workshop. The station had provided her with larger living space after the Cubs accidentally flooded her bathroom, trying to understand how the water system worked. Now she had 2 rooms instead of 1, and the second room was dedicated entirely to what Doyon had started calling the Cub Laboratory. The Cubs had distinct personalities that became more obvious each day. Pick was methodical and careful, always testing things multiple times before accepting a result. Ren was bold and sometimes reckless, willing to try anything to see what would happen. Suli was creative, often finding solutions that surprised even Hana. Right now, all 3 were bent over a puzzle box that Doyon had designed. It required opening a series of latches in the correct sequence while keeping pressure on specific panels. Hana watched from her workstation as Pick carefully manipulated the first latch while Ren held down 2 panels. Suli observed from the side, its eyes tracking every movement. "They've been at that for 40 minutes, Doyon said from the doorway. He visited every day now, bringing new puzzles and challenges for the Cubs. Most adult humans give up after 20. "They don't give up on anything," Hana said. "Last night, Suli spent 2 hours trying to calculate the volume of an irregular shape. I finally had to tell it to go to sleep. They trust you completely." Doyon came in and sat at the small table Hana had set up for meals. "I've been reading more about Velkari development. Cubs normally learn from the entire community. With dozens of adults providing input, these 3 only have you. And you. They get excited when you visit." A triumphant chirp interrupted them. The puzzle box clicked open, revealing the small treat Doyon had hidden inside. The Cubs divided the treat equally among themselves, a behavior they always demonstrated. They never fought over food or toys. Everything was shared. Hana's comm chimed with a priority alert. Commander Junho's face appeared on the screen. "Dr. Kim, we have a situation in Sector 7. Hull breach minor but needs immediate attention. How fast can you get there?" 10 minutes. Hana was already standing, grabbing her emergency repair kit. "What happened?" "Micrometeor strike. Punched through the outer plating. We've sealed the section, but we need permanent repairs." "On my way." The Cubs were immediately on alert, sensing the urgency in her movements. They grabbed their own small collection of tools, items Hana had given them for practice. Pick carried a small measuring device. Ren had a light. Suli clutched a piece of metal that it liked to study. "You 3 need to stay here," Hana said firmly. "This is dangerous work." 3 pairs of eyes stared at her. The Cubs didn't move toward the door, but they didn't put down their tools either. They just waited, and somehow Hana knew they would follow her the moment she left. "They won't stay behind," Doyon said quietly. "You know they won't." Hana did know. In 3 weeks, the Cubs had never let her out of their sight for more than a few minutes. The caretaking bond was too strong. She made a decision that she hoped wouldn't get anyone killed. "Fine. But you follow my exact instructions. Stay behind me at all times, and if I tell you to run, you run back here. Understood?" The Cubs chirped in unison. A sound Hana had learned meant agreement. Sector 7 was in the station's outer ring, a cargo storage area that was currently empty for maintenance. The breach was small, just a few centimeters across, but it had damaged the surrounding structure. Air was leaking into space through emergency sealant that would only hold for a few hours. Hana assessed the damage while her team set up equipment. The Cubs stayed close to her, but they weren't getting in the way. They observed everything with their characteristic intensity, mandibles clicking softly as they processed information. "We need to cut away the damaged plating and weld a new section in place," Hana explained to her team. "The structural supports underneath look intact, but we'll verify before we seal." The work began. Hana directed 2 engineers to cut away the damaged section, while a third prepared the replacement plating. It was delicate work. One wrong move and they could make the breach worse. The Cubs watched from a safe distance, their eyes following every action. That's when Suli chirped urgently and scurried forward. "Suli, get back!" But the Cub ignored her. It ran to the wall section adjacent to the breach and started tapping on it with a front leg. The tapping moved in a pattern up and down and across like Suli was searching for something. "Dr. Kim," one of the engineers called out. The Cub might be onto something. Hana ran her own scanner over the section Suli was indicating. Her screen lit up with warnings. There was a micro-fracture network spreading from the breach point. invisible to the naked eye but definitely present. If they'd sealed the breach without addressing those fractures, the entire section would have failed catastrophically within days. Sully found secondary damage. Hana pulled up a wider scan. The meteor impact created stress fractures throughout this entire panel. We need to replace the whole section, not just patch the breach. Commander Junho, monitoring from the command center, swore over the comm. That's a 6-hour job minimum. Better 6 hours now than explosive decompression later. The work expanded. More engineers arrived. What was supposed to be a quick patch became a major repair operation. And through it all, the Cubs helped in small but significant ways. Pick noticed when a tool was placed incorrectly. Ren alerted them to a loose safety line. Sully kept finding problems before they became disasters. 5 hours into the repair, Hana was exhausted. She'd been welding for 2 hours straight and her arms ached. The Cubs had finally settled down in a corner, their energy depleted. But when Hana took a break to drink water, all three of them perked up and scurried over to her. Pick offered her a ration bar from the emergency supplies. Ren brought her a clean cloth to wipe her face. Sully just pressed against her leg, providing warmth and comfort. "They're taking care of you," Doyun observed. He'd stayed for the entire repair, helping where he could. The caretaking goes both ways. Hana looked down at the 3 small aliens who'd become such a huge part of her life in just 3 weeks. They stared back with absolute trust and affection. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess it does." The repair was completed successfully. The new section sealed perfectly. All stress points reinforced, all fractures addressed. When the final inspection confirmed everything was secure, the engineering team cheered. The Cubs chirped excitedly, caught up in the celebration even though they probably didn't understand all the technical details. But they understood success. They understood that a problem had been solved through cooperation and persistence. And they understood that they'd been part of it. News of the repair spread quickly through the station. 3 Velkari Cubs had helped prevent a potential disaster. Within hours, the story reached beyond Kepler 9. Galactic news networks picked it up. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the human engineer and the alien children she was raising. Requests for interviews flooded Hana's comm. Scientists wanted to study the Cubs' learning patterns. Educators wanted to understand the teaching methods. Diplomats wanted to discuss the implications for interspecies relations. Hana ignored most of it. She had work to do and 3 Cubs to take care of. But she couldn't ignore the message that came from Miri Choi. The Galactic Council representative assigned to Kepler 9 Miri arrived at Hana's quarters that evening. A slim woman in formal diplomatic attire. She had the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller, and her eyes were sharp with intelligence. "Dr. Kim, thank you for seeing me. Did I have a choice?" Hana gestured for Mirai to sit. The Cubs were playing with their puzzle boxes in the corner, but their attention was divided between the puzzles and the visitor. "Not really." Mirai smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be direct. What you're doing here has attracted significant attention, the right kind and the wrong kind. I'm just taking care of 3 kids. You're demonstrating human capability for cross-species nurturing on a galactic stage. Do you understand what that means? There are species out there who've been watching humanity for decades, trying to determine if we're trustworthy partners or potential threats. This situation is providing them with data." Hana felt a chill. Coordinator Thelness mentioned something similar, that I'm being watched by everyone. Some see this as proof that humans can be trusted with positions of greater authority in galactic affairs. Others see it as evidence that humans are too emotionally driven, too quick to form attachments that could compromise judgment. Mirai leaned forward, "And some see it as a weakness to exploit. What does that mean?" "It means that not everyone is happy about this. There are species who've built their power on very different social structures. The idea that humans can successfully integrate into any family dynamic, any social system, threatens their worldview." Mirai glanced at the Cubs. "Those 3 aren't just children anymore, Dr. Kim. They're symbols." Hana looked at Pick, Ren, and Sully. They'd abandoned their puzzles and were now watching the conversation with obvious curiosity. To her, they were just kids who needed guidance and care. But she was beginning to understand that the rest of the galaxy saw something else entirely. What am I supposed to do differently? Not. The Cubs had names, Hana learned. Pick, Ren, and Sully. Coordinator Thelness had provided a data file with basic information about Velkari young, their dietary needs, and a rough translation guide for their clicks and chirps. The file was surprisingly short for something that was supposed to help her raise 3 alien children for the next 3 months. Hana sat at her workstation with the file open on one screen and a live video call with Doyun on another. The cubs were behind her, arranging and rearranging their collection of objects on her floor. They'd been doing that for 2 hours. Apparently it was important. "This is insane," Hana said for probably the 10th time that morning. "How can an entire species have a protocol this specific and not tell anyone about it?" Doyun had spent most of the night researching. His face on the screen showed the particular kind of exhaustion that came from too much coffee and too many database searches. Because it hasn't happened in over 300 years. The Velkari stopped using the caretaking protocol when they left their homeworld and joined the galactic community. It's from their pre-spaceflight era. So why did it activate now? Best guess, instinct. The cubs saw what they interpreted as an anointing ritual, and their brains just switched on this ancient behavior pattern. Doyun rubbed his eyes. The really weird part is that the adult Velkari are going along with it. Thelnis could have just taken the cubs away and told you it was a mistake. But they didn't. Hana glanced back at the cubs. Suli, the smallest one, was trying to stack stones on top of one of the bone tools. The stack kept falling over, but Suli kept trying. Thelnis said rejection would damage them. What does that even mean? The file says Velkari cubs imprint on their chosen caretaker. If they're rejected, they can develop something like depression. It affects their development. Doyun leaned closer to his camera. Hana, I think the Velkari are taking this seriously because they have to. Once the cubs made their choice, there was no going back. A soft clicking made Hana turn around. Pick. The one with darker green coloring was standing beside her chair with a small container. It held the container up to her, mandibles moving in what the translation file labeled as a request gesture. What do you need, Pick? Pick clicked more insistently and pushed the container toward her hand. Hana took it and opened the lid. Inside was a collection of small metal scraps, the kind that accumulated in engineering workshops. Broken fasteners, bent wire, damaged circuits. You want me to fix these? The cub's eyes shifted to a bright, happy blue. It chirped and bounced on its legs. Behind it, Ren and Suli stopped what they were doing and watched intently. Hana picked up one of the bent wires. Okay, so if I straighten this out... She used her fingers to carefully unbend the wire, working slowly so the cubs could see. It becomes useful again, see? All 3 cubs moved closer. Their eyes were locked on her hands. When she finished straightening the wire and held it up, they all chirped in unison. Pick carefully took the wire back and placed it in the container with obvious reverence. They're watching you like you just performed magic, Doyun said from the screen. I bent a wire straight. To them, that might as well be magic. Think about it. You're showing them problem solving. How to make broken things useful again. Doyun's expression shifted to something thoughtful. Hana, I think that's what the caretaking is actually about. Teaching. The rest of the morning became an impromptu lesson in basic repairs. The cubs brought her more broken objects one at a time and watched as she either fixed them or explained why they couldn't be fixed. They absorbed everything with an intensity that was almost unsettling. When Hana showed Ren how to use a simple manual screwdriver, the cub picked up the motion after just 2 demonstrations. By afternoon, Hana had to go to work. Station's structural integrity didn't pause for unexpected parenthood. The problem was that the cubs refused to stay in her quarters. They're following me, Hana said into her comm as she walked through the station corridors. Behind her, 3 small Velkari scurried to keep up, their leg joints clicking on the metal floor. I tried closing the door. They just clicked sadly until I opened it. I tried leaving through the emergency maintenance hatch. They waited at the main door. How did they even know I'd come back that way? Doyun's laugh crackled through the speaker. Maybe bring them to work? The repair site is in a closed section anyway. That's how Hana ended up bringing 3 alien cubs to an active engineering site. The other engineers on her team stared as she arrived with her unusual entourage. Commander Junho, the station's head of operations, happened to be inspecting the repair site that day. He took one look at the situation and pinched the bridge of his nose. Dr. Kim, are those the Velkari cubs everyone's been talking about? Yes, sir. They won't leave my side. Something about the caretaking protocol. I'm aware. Junho crouched down to look at the cubs. They looked back at him without fear, curious but not approaching. I've been getting reports all morning. Apparently, this is a very big deal in Velkari culture. Coordinator Thelnis has requested that we accommodate the situation. Accommodate how? By letting you do your job with 3 small aliens attached to you. Junho stood up and straightened his uniform. Just keep them safe. If something happens to them, we'll have a diplomatic crisis that makes the trade wars look like a minor disagreement. Hana set the cubs up in a corner of the work site with strict instructions to stay put. She gave them some of her spare tools to examine. Nothing dangerous, just measurement devices and basic implements. Then she got to work reviewing the structural repairs. The outer ring of Kepler-9 had developed microfractures from normal wear and stress. The repair involved reinforcing the affected sections with new support beams and resealing the hull plating. It was routine work, but it required precision. Hana directed her team through the process, checking measurements and approving each step. She was so focused on the work that she didn't notice Suli had wandered over until the cub tugged on her pant leg. "Suli, you're supposed to stay in the corner." The cub chirped and pointed with a front leg at one of the support beams being installed. Then it made a gesture that looked like snapping something in half. "What? The beam is fine. We checked all the specifications." Suli chirped more urgently and waved its legs in what might have been frustration. It scurried over to the beam and tapped a specific point with one leg, then made the braking gesture again. Hana followed the cub and examined the spot Suli had indicated. At first she didn't see anything. Then she adjusted her light and looked closer. There was a hairline crack in the beam's surface, barely visible, but definitely present. If they'd installed that beam, it would have failed within months. "Hold installation," Hana called to her team. "We've got a defective beam." One of the engineers came over to look.
"How did you spot that?"
"We ran quality checks on all these beams and I didn't spot it. Suli did." Hana looked down at the cub, who was now sitting quietly beside the beam, eyes bright blue with what might have been pride. "Good catch, little one." The engineer stared at the cub. "The baby alien found a manufacturing defect that our scanners missed?" Apparently. By the end of the shift, word had spread through the station. The Velkari cubs weren't just following Hana around. They were learning from her. And more than that, they were applying what they learned. Pick helped identify a misaligned seal. Ren noticed when a tool was calibrated incorrectly. They were actively participating in the work. That evening, back in her quarters, Hana sat on her couch with all 3 cubs clustered around her. They were tired from the day's activities, their movements slower and their clicks softer. Suli had fallen asleep against her leg, its carapace rising and falling with steady breaths. Her door chimed. Coordinator Thelnis stood outside, alone this time. "Dr. Kim, may I enter?" Hana nodded. "Careful not to wake Suli." Thelnis came in and looked at the cubs with an expression that the translator interpreted as warmth and sadness mixed together. "They are content with you." "They're good kids," Hana said, surprised to find she meant it. "Smart, too. Suli caught a defect in a support beam today that our scanners missed. That is the purpose of the caretaking. The cubs learn by observation and imitation. They develop their problem-solving abilities through exposure to challenges." Thelnis's mandibles clicked in a slow, thoughtful pattern. "You are teaching them well. I'm not doing anything special. Just my regular work. That is what makes you suitable. You do not pretend or perform. You show them reality, problems and solutions, failures and successes. This is what they need." The coordinator paused. "Dr. Kim, you should know that other species are watching this situation with great interest." "What do you mean?" "The Galactic Council has been notified. A human successfully bonding with Velkari cubs is unprecedented. There are those who see this as an opportunity. There are also those who see it as a threat." Hana looked down at the sleeping cubs. Ren had joined Suli in sleep, while Pick was fighting to keep its eyes open. "They're just children." "How could that be threatening?" "Because of what it means. If humans can successfully raise and teach Velkari young, what does that say about humanity's capacity for cross-species understanding? What opportunities might that create? What power might that represent?" Thelnis moved toward the door. The coffee mug tipped in slow motion, or at least that's how Hana remembered it later. One moment she was reaching across the table for her data pad, and the next, hot brown liquid was cascading over the edge and splashing directly onto the 3 insectoid aliens standing beside her table. Hana froze. Her hand hung in the air, still extended from the motion that had knocked the mug over. The aliens stood perfectly still, coffee dripping from their iridescent carapaces. They looked like giant mantises if mantises wore flowing robes and carried diplomatic cases. Their compound eyes shifted color from blue to yellow to something that might have been orange. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Hana jumped up, grabbing napkins from the dispenser. "I didn't see you there, I was just... Here, let me..." The lead alien raised one of its forearms. The gesture was so deliberate, so formal, that Hana stopped mid-reach with a handful of napkins. The alien's mandibles clicked together in a pattern that sounded almost like speech. A small device on its chest translated the clicks into flat mechanical words. "No distress. Liquid is not harmful to Velkari physiology." "Still, I should have been more careful," Hana said. She noticed other people in the station's plaza were staring now. Great. Just what she needed on a Tuesday afternoon. "Can I at least pay for cleaning or something?" The alien tilted its triangular head. Its companions had moved closer, forming a tight semicircle around Hana. Their mandibles clicked rapidly to each other, too fast for the translator to keep up. The lead alien turned back to her. "What is your designation?" "My what?" "Oh, my name, Dr. Hana Kim. I work in structural engineering here on the station." More clicking. The alien seemed agitated, though Hana had no idea how to read their body language. One of them touched its companion's arm with a front leg. The lead alien's eyes flickered through another color change. "Dr. Hana Kim, we acknowledge. We must depart now." The alien gave a strange bow, bending its entire thorax forward. "May your path remain clear." They left quickly, robes swishing behind them. Hana stood there with her napkins, watching them disappear into the crowd. Around her, the other station residents gradually went back to their business. A cleaning drone whirred up to handle the spilled coffee. Doyen appeared at her elbow, holding 2 fresh cups of coffee. "Did you just assault the Velkari diplomatic delegation?" "It was an accident." Hana took the offered cup gratefully. "How was I supposed to know they'd be standing right there?" "They don't make any sound when they walk. They're investigating trade agreements with the station." Doyen sat down across from her. He was her closest friend on Kepler 9, another engineer who'd left Earth for the excitement of space station life. "You might have just created a diplomatic incident. It was coffee, not acid. They said it didn't harm them." Hana pulled her datapad closer and tried to focus on the structural diagram she'd been reviewing. A section of the station's outer ring needed reinforcement, and she had to approve the repair schedule. Besides, they were polite about it. Doyen shrugged. "Velkari are always polite. It's kind of their thing. They're also incredibly mysterious. Nobody really knows much about their culture beyond the basic trade stuff." Hana didn't think much more about the incident. She finished her review, submitted her recommendations, and went back to her quarters. The station operated on a 24-hour cycle synced to Earth time, and her shift was over. She was looking forward to a quiet evening, maybe watching a movie, maybe just sleeping. When the door to her quarters opened, she found 3 small aliens sitting in the corridor outside. They were clearly Velkari, but much smaller than the adults she'd encountered in the plaza. Each one was about the size of a large cat, with the same iridescent carapaces but in lighter shades of green and blue. They looked up at her with their compound eyes, mandibles clicking softly. Around them was an array of objects, small metal containers, primitive-looking tools made from what looked like carved bone, a bucket filled with smooth stones. The objects were arranged in a careful pattern, forming a semicircle around her doorway. Hello?" Hana looked up and down the corridor. No adults in sight. "Are you guys lost?" The smallest one chirped at her. It picked up one of the tools and held it out, its tiny arms trembling with either effort or excitement. The other 2 grabbed containers and pushed them toward her feet. "I don't understand." Hana crouched down, careful not to disturb their arrangement. "Where are your parents? Does someone need to come get you?" They just clicked at her, mandibles moving in what might have been eagerness. One of them scurried forward and touched her shoe with a front leg, then scurried back to its position. All 3 of them settled into waiting positions, their eyes fixed on her. Hana tapped her wristcom. "Doyen, I need you to come to my quarters." "Like right now? What's wrong?" "There are baby aliens outside my door." 10 minutes later, Doyen stood beside her, staring at the small Velkari. "Those are cubs. Juveniles, anyway. Velkari young are called cubs in the translation databases. Why are they here? Why are they giving me things?" Hana pointed at the arranged objects. "This is weird, right?" "This is definitely weird. Extremely weird." Doyen pulled up his datapad and started searching. Velkari don't usually bring their cubs off-world. They're super protective of them. I'm not finding anything in the public databases about this kind of behavior. Should we call security? And tell them what? That small aliens are being polite outside your door? Hana tried to shoo the cubs away. They didn't budge. She tried stepping over them to go inside. They followed her, carrying their objects with them. When she closed the door, they sat outside and clicked persistently until she opened it again out of guilt. By the time station security arrived an hour later, Hana had given up and let the cubs inside. They'd arranged their objects on her floor and were now sitting in a neat row, watching her every move. When she sat on her couch, they sat. When she stood up, their heads tracked her movement. The security officer was a Centauran, a blue-skinned humanoid with practical experience in dealing with various species. He took one look at the situation and his expression shifted to something between confusion and concern. Dr. Kim, I need to contact the Velkari delegation immediately. Finally, someone who can explain this. But when Coordinator Thelnis arrived with 2 other adult Velkari, the explanation was not what Hana expected. The coordinator stood in her doorway, looked at the 3 cubs, then looked at Hana. The color shifts in its eyes went through a rapid sequence that the translator struggled to interpret as emotional states. Then, deliberately and precisely, Coordinator Thelnis bowed so low that its head nearly touched the floor. Dr. Hana Kim, you have been chosen by the young. The caretaking has begun. The what has what now? Hana looked from the coordinator to Doyen to the security officer. Everyone looked equally baffled except the Velkari. This is an ancient protocol. When the young ones recognize a worthy guardian, they offer themselves for teaching. You have been anointed. Thelnis gestured to the coffee stain still visible on its robe. The mark of choosing. I spilled coffee on you. Yes, the liquid of offering. The cubs witnessed the anointing and have claimed you as their chosen mother. The caretaking will last for 1 full cycle, 90 of your Earth days. Hana sat down heavily on her couch. The 3 cubs immediately clustered around her feet, clicking contentedly. One of them placed a smooth stone on her shoe. I can't be an alien mom. I'm an engineer. I don't even have plants because I forget to water them. The caretaking is not optional, Thelnis said quietly. To reject the cubs now would damage them psychologically. They have chosen you, Dr. Kim. In 90 days, when they are ready, they will return to us. Until then, they are your responsibility. After the Velkari delegation left with promises to send supplies and instructions, Hana sat on her couch and stared at the 3 small aliens who apparently now thought she was their mother. Doyen sat beside her, equally stunned. So, he said finally, this is your life now. One of the cubs climbed onto the couch and settled against Hana's leg. Its carapace was warm and smooth, and it made a soft clicking sound that might have been contentment. This is my life now, Hana agreed. She had no idea that in 90 days, everything would change, not just for her, but for humanity's entire relationship with the galaxy, all because of spilled coffee and 3 small aliens who decided she was worthy of their trust.